You see?
Yes, I guess.
I see the
Matt
badge, yeah.
Krause, hello with beer.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome.
Thank you. Matt, I like the style.
Nechil, hey, a couple of people we know. You have a fan club, Alper. We can't hear you, Nechil. You have to make your microphone.
Andreas, can you make the welcoming automatically?
Hello, everyone. Hi, Alper. Hello, Andreas.
Manager, good to see you.
Hey, good to see you.
Good to see you guys. How are you?
Long time no see. Very good when we see you, of course.
Thank you. Same here.
Metin, also, all of you have a beer now, except Nechil.
I have long hair.
Yeah, very good. I don't have this either. So. Good.
Good to see all of you.
Welcome, everyone.
I guess, shall I start 1 minute after 1 o'clock?
Wait, I guess they are coming at the moment. It works automatically, no? We don't have to welcome them.
Oh, hello, Nuray Hanım. I'm sorry.
That's
How
okay.
are you?
I tried to say hello in between, but you were talking Manish, so I said, okay, not interfere.
Okay.
Good,
How are
good.
you?
Nice to see you also. Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to see you. Thank you.
I'm just focusing on the screen to get the things straight. So.
Okay, I will start now. Welcome you everybody to ISG, another free lesson on a weekly basis already. And we have a wonderful speaker today, which is Alper Rozanes. Big applause. And Alper, I know since 5-6 years, and we met actually in Toastmasters. He was a president in Toastmasters. And he's a person who changed his career after developing his speech abilities and his presentation skills. And after now 5, 6, 7 years doing that, we invited him to come to us to help us to show our friends how to present in a very different way so that you can really give a compelling message to your audience. So I don't want to hold much longer back. Alper is in Spain, in Barcelona, and he speaks today in English. And we saw this presentation. If you want to see it also in Turkish, I have it uploaded on my YouTube channel. And you can have the same presentation in Turkish. And today you will have it. Alper Rozanes in English presentation techniques.
Thank you very much, Andreas, for the nice introduction. I think I will start with a disclaimer that at any moment during the webinar, you might start hearing explosions because we are going through a festival in Spain about fireworks, something like that. So last night it kept until 5 a.m. exploding things. And I think the people who were exploding things last night are sleeping now. They may wake up soon and realize that, okay, we need to keep exploding things. So if that happens, I'll try to raise my voice to overcome the explosions, but don't be alarmed. It will be normal. Thank you all for coming. Like Andreas said, this is the second in this series. The first one we did in Turkish a couple of weeks ago, and I received beautiful comments about that. I thank you. I thank all the people who participated. And today I'm going to be speaking about the presentations and what the problem is, because I believe there's a problem, and I have been able to confirm this with many more people who said, yes, I think this problem exists. So basically, I want to talk about what the problem is, how we got here, and what can we do about it, and what happens if we do, and what happens if we don't. In a couple of seconds, I'm going to start sharing my screen for the presentation, and automatically I should be pushed on your screen to one of the corners as a very tiny object. If you want to keep seeing my face as well as the presentation itself, I recommend that you go to the setting on Zoom to split the screen, and so that you can watch me with the same time with the presentation. But before I begin, I would like to share a very short story on how I got to this point. Actually, it's not a happy beginning. Many years ago, I was working in a company selling things. And one of my job requirements was to go to meetings, to large meetings, and introduce the company, introduce the products. And one day I got up to the stage. There were about, I think, 40 or 50 people in front of me. I got up to the stage. It was my turn to speak. You know, I had my presentation, I had my notes. By notes, I mean A4 papers of full text, which I didn't know that they wouldn't work at all. I got to the stage and something interesting happened. I could not open my mouth. I blanked out like I never have in my life. People were looking at me, I was looking at them. You know, for 2 or 3 seconds, it's normal. At 10 seconds, you realize something is wrong. At 30 seconds, you realize, oh my God, this train has hit the wall. Let's just cancel it. So I felt an arm on my shoulder. They pulled me out of the stage and somebody else had to continue with the presentation. I froze. I literally froze. I couldn't open my mouth. I couldn't speak. I forgot about everything that I was going to tell. It was not a nice experience. For that reason, I started researching what happened, and I realized that, you know, stage fright, normal situation, it's doable, it's manageable. That's when I started with Toastmasters, like Andreas said, and I started getting more and more comfortable in front of people speaking, and then it became addictive. Matt is in the room. He likes saying that when I meet someone, it takes roughly about 20 to 30 seconds before I start telling about Toastmasters. So it has created such a change in my life that now is part of my identity. So today I would like to share with you, and I've been doing this for more than 10 years now. Today I would like to share with you how we come to the point of having problems in the way we do business presentations, what the problem is, what we can do about them, and what we have to benefit. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. Can somebody confirm that they can see a gentleman staring at the wall?
I can.
Okay, great. So, like I said, there is a serious problem, especially with the business presentations, but in presentations in general. And the problem is this. These are actual audience photos from presentations or speeches or gatherings. And look, there obviously is a problem, especially the girl on the bottom left of the screen. She doesn't seem to be enjoying it at all, but she's joined by many more others, including myself. I'm sure you have been in situations where someone started speaking, someone started making a presentation, and it didn't go well, and you started getting bored. But this is not a new phenomenon. History is filled with people who are bored with presentations or public speaking, especially when people tell them to, okay, just sit down and listen, which is almost impossible. So in order to understand how this problem began, I will take you on a time travel. So famously, from the 2020, we will go all the way back to 1987. Now, 1987 is the date that PowerPoint came to existence. I'm not saying that it's the root cause of the problem, but the way we use it, especially in the presentations, is the cause. At the time, it wasn't even owned by Microsoft. It was released by a company named Forethought and then sold to Microsoft. To this day, I think it is the most successful acquisition in Microsoft's history. And the usage of the program picked up. It picked up tremendously, so much so that today, on this day, various market researchers project that there are 30 million presentations every single day, 365 days a year, including this one that I'm doing right now, including another one in a company, including another one someplace else. Roughly speaking, we're talking about 30 million times every day that people gather in a room and somebody tells them something. And they usually do it like this. we are in the year 2020. This is something that we still keep on saying. If you realize, actually, there's a guy on the stage who is embedded into his message. But unfortunately, it doesn't work. And the simple reason is this thing that we have in our head. It works in such a way that is incongruent with the way we've learned to use the software. And of course, I will come to the reasons why we learn to use it that way. But the thing is, we have a very bad attention span when it comes to interpreting complicated messages, especially if they are like in the shape of the slides that you saw before. We are so bad that right now we actually have the attention span shorter than a goldfish. And there is some data to back this up. But about this, I will add one comment towards the end of the presentation. So why is this important? Why is this relevant? Why is PowerPoint, and especially not only PowerPoint, especially any visual communication tool that we use during presentations, why is it important? Because we perceive these things visually. Now, I would like to share with you some interesting facts about the visual perception, which is one of the highest, not one of the highest, it's actually the highest mode of perception that we have in terms of perceiving the outside world, including presentations. And because PowerPoint or any other presentation software is a visual communication tool, the rules of visual perception also apply in this case. That's why we should be careful about them. Now, in order to give you an idea on how strong this sense is, I would like to take you on another journey. And this time we sit in a room with some researchers. Let's say we go into a room, we sit across the table from a researcher, and on the table there are huge stacks of paper with photos on them, and they take one of those photos and show you only for 2 seconds, and they put it on the side. They take another one and show it for 2 seconds. They repeat this for 2,500 times. So none of the photos are the same. They are completely unique, different from each other. And you are exposed to 2,500 photos only for 2 seconds each. Then the research is finished, you shake hands, you leave, but you came back to the same table after 3 days. Again, the same person is sitting in front of you. There's a stack of photos next to him or her, picks up one of them, shows you, and asks a very simple question. This photo that I'm showing you right now, was it among the 2,500 photos that you saw 3 days ago for 2 seconds only? How much do you think accurately we could remember or identify whether that photo was among the more than 2,000 photos that we saw? Some numbers may be flying in your mind right now, but the number is actually huge. With 90% accuracy, we are able to recognize something visual that we saw, some time ago. Now, the interesting thing is, if you were to meet with this person 1 year later, you will still be accurately recollecting more than 50% of the photos that you saw only for 2 seconds each. So that is how strong the visual perception is. And it's something in the brain. However, in the same brain, when we're exposed to information in written form or in the shape of spoken words, we only have a 10% of accurate recollection after the same amount of time. However, catch this. If you were to accompany that written or spoken information with a visual, suddenly the recollection accuracy goes up 6 times, more than 6 times. This is the power of visual perception. However, with great power comes great responsibility. And the issue is, if I hit the other person's visual perception with this, the brain automatically shuts down. I think maybe through the natural laws of efficiency. So if there is only one thing that we need to remember about the visual perception, that's we need to practice brevity in the way that we communicate with people, in the shape of slides or spoken words or written. We need to practice brevity. So that's one of the major pillars that we need to watch for. Now, in the light of this information, I would like to talk to you about, okay, then how do we make a successful presentation or a compelling presentation? And with that, I would like to share with you 3 main pillars. And they are the content of the presentation, the design of the slides, if we are using a slide software, and in most cases we are, and the way we deliver that. So today I will give you short information on why these 3 pillars are important, how we make them stronger, and what we need to practice. And with that, I would like to throw your way 3 important cardinal questions to ask. But we ask these questions before the presentation, not during, not after, before the presentations. And I got these 3 questions from the book. You got 8 Seconds by Paul Hellman. I strongly recommend it. It's a very good book on how to make concise messages with brevity, and it's one of the great resources that I found. The first question, he says, which I truly believe is true, is your audience is going to ask, why should I listen to this? It's the first question that they're going to ask. So, like I said, before the presentation, before we walk up to the stage, we need to answer this question. Why should I listen to this? The second question that they're going to ask is, what exactly are you saying? Now, in my experience, in my bad experiences, I have seen that just because I know the topic and I tell about it, it doesn't mean that they're going to understand. It doesn't mean that they care. It doesn't mean that they're going to identify with it. For that reason, I need to answer the first question is why it is important that they listen to this. And the second thing is, what is it that exactly I'm saying? As simple as possible. And of course, they will want to know, okay, great, what should I do with this information? If I don't find a way to convey the message that this information is important and this is what you should be doing with that, they will probably fail to remember that. So the key with these questions is that when it comes to the presentation, I may be the one, or you may be the one on the stage with the lights shining on you, with the camera facing you, with everybody looking at you. We might fall into the delusion that, well, I'm the star. But no, actually the star of the show is the audience, because they will be the ones to take your message or not to take it, to listen to you or not to listen to you. So it's super important. It's extremely important that we keep this mindset that the audience is actually the star of the show. And at the end of the day, they will be the ones to adopt my message or not. Even if I answer these questions, however, is it guaranteed that they are going to accept it? Is it guaranteed that they are going to take the message and act on it? No. For that reason, I may clearly need to define what it is that they are going to gain if they take this message, or what is it that they're going to lose if they take this message and not act on it. So I need to be able to clearly identify from the perspective of my audience, their benefits, their gains, or their losses, and convey them so that they can take a better informed decision. But they still may need some help. They may need some hand-holding, especially if I want them to move in a certain direction. Regardless of how clearly I explain the things, it may be new information for them. It may be information they're hearing for the first time. So for that reason, I may also need to provide them with a list of the required steps or the roadmap that they need to take. Now, just because I identify my messages clearly, just because I identify the needs of my audience, does not guarantee that they're going to take those steps, does not guarantee that they're going to identify with the message. It's very possible that they will show resistance. In this case, as the presenter or as the speaker, it is my job and it is my responsibility to anticipate beforehand what those resistance points could be. And one of the biggest advantages of that would be if I am able to identify those resistance points, I can actually incorporate them into my presentation. So before they can even resist, I can address the resistance myself as a speaker to help them understand that the obstacles that they might think they may face are can be overcome. And I also incorporate the sentiment that, well, I came here prepared. So I came here having already addressed these issues. So anticipating those resistance points is also one of the responsibilities as a presenter. So these are the things for the first pillar of the presentation preparation, the content. Of course, this is a topic that we can talk for days and for a much longer time, but for brevity, for the sake of brevity, these are the main points that I wanted to share with you in terms of the content. And now I would like to move to the second pillar, which is the design. And in this case, I love this phrase from Leonardo da Vinci, where he says, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. But here's the thing with quotes. On the internet, there are at least 9 other sources for this quote. So we may never know who actually said it, Leonardo da Vinci or somebody else. But I think the message is clear, that the more we entertain the idea of simplicity in the presentation, is going to be better for the audience to digest and for them to be able to actually understand it. And my number one rule in this case is minimize the text. For the reasons I mentioned in the beginning, it's a very complicated process for the brain to ingest, to digest all the text that it sees. So it's very easy to block. It's completely different with the visuals. So if there's an important message that you want to convey, no matter how detailed it is, I recommend that you minimize the text, especially if you're using slides. You minimize the text and divide the slides into multiple slides if necessary. Now, in this case, when I say this, one of the biggest resistance points that I get is, what about my slide count? It increases. Well, I was going to have 20 slides, but now I have 30 or 40 slides. My answer is very simple. Do not care about the slide count. As long as you are able to convey the message clearly, it's not your obligation to do the presentation with as minimum slides as possible, but it is your obligation to do the presentation in a way which is easy to understand, easy to comprehend, and easy to digest. If it requires that you use twice the number of slides, go with it. Increase your slide count. Don't worry about that. Just don't show it. Just don't show the people that you're going to hit them with 150 slides like I'm doing you right now. Don't show it, because then they may have the based on their past experiences, they may think, oh my God, 150 slides, this is going to take forever. Don't show it, but minimize the text and divide the slides into multiple slides as long as it's necessary. When using images, one of the quickest ways to reduce the quality of the presentation is using distorted images. I don't know why people do that. It's not necessary, and there are all sorts of tools in all the presentation software to prevent this. But distorted images is, like I said, one of the quickest ways to convey the idea, to convey the sensation that I didn't pay too much attention when preparing this presentation. So don't do it. I strongly suggest that you don't do it. It's one of the easiest things to fix. And when choosing with emotions, when choosing visuals for the presentation, I recommend that you mess with their emotions. You choose the images so that it invokes the emotion that you want to convey. You know, there can be many emotions that you can convey, and using the images with the emotional context, with the emotional content is a good way of actually invoking those emotions in the audience. You can also use colors. You can also use color schemes to invoke certain emotions, and rather than using a huge variety of color schemes, I recommend that you pick 1 or 2 based on the emotion, based on the sentiment that you want to convey, and invest on those colors. Again, with the images, it's very easy to find something with a white background, and it's also one of those things like the distorted images, which quickly conveys the idea that, yeah, I didn't put too much time into this presentation, so you're seeing this. With one click, with only one single click in PowerPoint or in any other presentation software, you're able to remove those white backgrounds and actually incorporate it in such a way that is more in line, more congruent with your design. One of my pet peeves about presentation is not only this guy, but things like this. And sometimes people ask me, when should I use animated images which loop constantly and indefinitely? When should I use them? And my answer is never. I cannot see any reason as to why a message could be amplified by using something that moves on the screen. Remember that the presentation, the slides actually is still moving in the back, so I'm going to shut this off. The idea of the visuals are to accompany your message. So your slides are not the show, you are the show. And anything that moves behind you, especially continuously, will take attention from you and is going to make people focus on something else rather than you. One of the other things that is increasing with each version of the software is typefaces. There are so many of them right now. But again, just with the visuals, just with the overall sense of brevity, I recommend that you choose 1 or 2 typefaces, maybe 3 maximum. Again, in line with your message, in line with the sentiment that you want to convey. And for that reason, I wouldn't probably place any limitations on the typeface except for Comic Sans. I think we're done with Comic Sans. Like the moving penguin that you just saw, I cannot see any reason why someone would say, okay, Comic Sans is a good font for this presentation. So think, I recommend that you don't use that. Just like Comic Sans, I also recommend that you avoid overuse and cliche visuals like hands shaking in the sky, or people with thumbs up, or like this girl here who is extremely happy in front of the computer. I think we're done with these visuals, and in order to create a sense of authenticity, a sense of effectiveness in visual sense, you can use your original images, you can use much more high quality images. So where to find them? Look, the internet is filled with them, but I'm going to recommend a couple of websites. The thing with these websites is, for example, Pexels is one of them, and Pixabay is the other one. They have an enormous library of images, which are high quality, free, and also unlicensed. Because technically, in privacy terms, we're not allowed to take any image off the internet, put it on the slideshow, put it on the presentation. So the image needs to be licensed as well. With these 2 websites, you don't have to worry about that. If the image that you're looking for exists in these websites, you can find them. But these are my 2 favorites. There is a mountain of resources as far as these free images websites are concerned. If you would like to invest in a membership or pay for even higher quality images, Deposit Photos is also my favorite, as well as iStock Photo. Now, using visuals is a very good way of conveying the message. But there may be some cases where you may say, look, this topic requires that I write these 3 texts on the same slide, and I have to show them together. In this case, rather than showing the entire text, let's say you're going to share 3 items, rather than showing the entire items, all of the items at the same time, and hoping that the audience will focus on you or whatever you're talking, you can use builds. This is one of the most effective, one of the easiest ways of making sure that the audience follows you as you speak. Now, in a second, you will see that this is one single slide and I have 3 items. But the first item comes up only when I'm ready. And when I tell you that, well, the quickest method for simplifying your text is using builds. Now, there will be 2 more items, but I'm not finished with the first one yet. So you don't have anything else to focus on the screen. Only when you decide that it is time to move from the first one to the second one, you hit the click, and then the second one comes in. The first one fades out, but is still on the slide. So if the person wants to connect the second item with the first one, he or she is free to do so. But now, obviously, you're speaking about the second one. Only when you're finished with the second one and you want to move to the third one, you can hit next, and then the third item comes, and then the second one also falls into the background. This way, this is just one slide. This way, you're able to put 3 items on the slide. By the way, this could be text, images, whatever. But the method of using the builds is one of the strongest and the most powerful ways that you can direct your audience's attention to the very thing that you're talking about at that moment. If you have a presentation that you need to do tomorrow, applying builds to that presentation will probably take no more than 1 hour. So I strongly recommend that you use it. It's one of the simplest ways that you can increase the efficiency of your presentation in the shortest amount of time. One of my other pet peeves about the presentations is using the white background. Look, I understand we are coming from a time where we literally had to dim the lights in the room when we started doing presentations. And we had to lower the lights, we had to cover the curtains because the machines were not strong enough so people couldn't see things unless they were white. And I also understand, in the year 2020, even in the last version, even in the last release, this is the opening screen of PowerPoint. Well, at least finally they switched from 4:3 ratio to aspect ratio to 16:9. But I think this is one of the worst ways to start designing a presentation. Click to enter title, click to add subtitle. No wonder we all see these white slides with so much text on them. But I think it is time that we embrace our dark side. Don't be afraid of that. I think all the equipment these days are powerful enough to show even the darkest thing that you want to put on the presentation. And it's actually better on the eyes, especially if you are in front of a large group of people. If there's a large screen behind you, I mean, poor people, they are exposed with that white light. So for 2 things, also the second thing is also to differentiate from all the presentations, from most of the presentations out there. So let's say if 80% use a white background with the standard graphics, I recommend that you differentiate yourself by using like a dark theme or something that is in line with darker colors. Now, simplification not only applies to the text, not only applies to the images, but especially to your charts if you're using them. And in the business presentations, we use them all the time. We use bar charts, line charts, pie charts. We even use charts for charts. So the same thing applies here. Like the message that you were talking before, when a chart is shown to the person, they shouldn't be confused. They shouldn't be thinking, what am I supposed to see here? Okay, I see a lot of things, but what am I supposed to focus? Imagine this situation where this guy is showing this chart. God only knows where the people are focusing at this moment. But again, that's not what I want. As a presenter, I want them to focus on what's important. So it is my job to actually highlight what is important when I show a chart. And to give you an example, this is a very typical bar chart that you can see in any business presentation. And let's say the subject here is talking about something going on in the 3rd quarter. Now, when you see the slide, it's very possible for you to focus on a different part. You can be focusing on the, let's say, the yellow bar because it's the highest, or the red because you like color red. You might even be focusing on the lines in the background, totally unrelated to the topic. But as the presenter, it is my responsibility to make sure that when you look at the chart, a huge percentage of the time, of course not 100%, but a huge percentage of the time, you focus on Q3. And there are very simple, very easy steps of doing that. You just highlight what's important, and then you still keep the same information on the chart, which may be used for comparison, but you can remove anything that is unnecessary and you can highlight everything, or in this case, the one thing that is important. Speaking of elimination, I also recommend that you eliminate redundancy. For example, this is a typical line chart talking about sales versus profits. And the story that I'm telling is, yes, our sales are going up, but our profits are going down. In this case, the audience has to go through the trouble of identifying what is what. The sales, okay, I think it's the blue line, but let me, instead of doing that, just eliminate everything that is not necessary, put the labels onto the lines. So now people in 2 seconds or less, they are able to see that you're talking about sales increasing, but at the same time, you're talking about your profits declining. That should be a difficult conversation to have. One more thing about charts is treating your data fairly, being just, being honest, being 100% open. What I mean is this. Let's say you're talking about last year's quarterly performance and you're showing Q1 to 4. Actually, I forgot to put Q4, I kept Q3. Okay, 2 quarters in a year. In this case, the audience who is looking at this chart may feel that Q1 results are worse than Q3, well, the yellow Q3 at least, because I made a mistake there. So they may be inclined to think that the blue part is smaller, actually much smaller than the yellow part, but in reality, they are exactly the same. So I recommend that you avoid using the many techniques that the presentation software has to make things like 3D, shiny, or more attractive. But I recommend that you stick to the principle of brevity and display the data as accurately and as simply as possible. But regardless of whatever you choose to place on each slide, could be text, could be graphics, could be charts, could be images, whatever, I recommend, in fact, I urge that you create breathing space. What I mean by breathing space is this. This is a slide, and in the middle of the slide, there's a box. Now, I have so much white space around the slide. I have so much space that it will be very easy to make this box as big as possible. But when I look at how premium brands advertise, I notice that they use a lot of white space. When I say white space, I mean the space around the object, which is empty. They use a lot of empty space. So they put the product in the middle, and there is so much space around, which, in my opinion, increases, amplifies the value of the thing that you're showing, in the middle of either the advertising or the slide. So don't be afraid of creating breathing space. And in fact, I recommend that you do. But at the end of the day, again, regardless of however you choose to design the slide, remember to treat them as advertising boards. Let's say you have 3 seconds for the audience to understand. It shouldn't take more than that. If it takes more than that, if they cannot identify what you're talking about in 3 seconds or less, then maybe it's time to split the chart split the slide into multiple slides and make it more easy to understand. Think of your slides as a billboard that you paid, thousands of dollars for every square meter. And one of the tools that I would like to show is the slide sorter, the tool that actually gives you an overall look on your presentation. And you can use this tool to achieve 2 things. One is to give you an idea about the flow of your message, because now you can see a visual representation of your slides. Instead of only top to bottom, you can see in a bigger picture. And 2, to see if there is congruency with the design of the presentation. Because especially with presentations who are prepared by multiple groups, we sometimes see completely different introduction slides of 10 slides, for example, in reds, which are continued by greens, which ends by blues. The fonts are different, the shapes are different. So the slide sorter view actually is a strong tool to give you an overall sense of your presentation, and I suggest that you use it. Look, I understand at the end of the day, it's very easy to treat our slides as artwork. Look, and I have been there. It's very difficult once you start designing, once you start working on the presentation, it's very easy to fall into the trap of treating the slides as artwork, and I understand that. But at the end of the day, we need to let go of perfection. We can spend so much time into designing the slides. We can spend so much time making it better and better and better, but there is no end to it. We need to let go of perfection. And remember that the slides are, at the end of the day, are visual tools to accompany my message. They are not the main presentation. You are the main presentation, and the slides are there only to support you, not vice versa. And that's the thing I wanted to share with you in terms of the design part. And finally, we go into the delivery. And in the delivery part, I would actually like to share with you briefly 3 things. And the first one is the rehearsal, which I think is super important for the success of the presentation. The second is going to be about the body language. And the third one is going to be about the way we speak. Okay, I said 3, but maybe there will be one thing additional at the end. Now, the reason for why rehearsal is important is it provides you with 2 benefits. Because when you go to the presentation, you may be facing all sorts of technological glitches. You may have, tried it so many times in the office, in home, before you go to the stage. Even at that moment, anything can go wrong. If you're not rehearsed well enough, and if you don't know the presentation or your speech well enough, then it will not be very easy to overcome the technical glitches, or maybe say that, okay, the presentation is not working, so I'm going to have to present this myself. You may have to do that, by the way. There is no 100% guarantee that all equipment will work just fine. Murphy can walk into the room at any moment, and you may have to make your presentation without actually the slide deck. Been there, done that. Well, the first time couldn't do it, but then started rehearsing. And the second thing is there may be other last-minute changes. For example, you may have prepared for a 20-minute presentation, but something may have happened with the organization, and they may tell you, look, you only have 5 minutes. So instead of speaking 4 times faster, try to finish the same presentation in 5 minutes. No, you should have done enough rehearsal to say, okay, no problem. I know where my main points are. I know the hierarchy of my points. I know what is more important than the others. So I can make a shortened version. One of the other benefits of rehearsal is that it gives you the freedom to interact more with your audience. It gives you freedom to do other things rather than trying to remember what your message is, where you're moving towards, what you're going to talk about. So if you have enough rehearsal time before the presentation, then you shouldn't have to worry about what's coming after what. So now you have more time or more resources to actually, enjoy interacting with the audience, enjoy asking questions, getting responses, maybe tailor your message on the spot, on the fly, according to the responses that you get. But for this, you need to have prepared well. And that's one of the most important points of the rehearsal. During the rehearsal, this is not something that I did before, but when I started doing it, I saw immense benefits from that, is to get multiple views from other people. Because like I said, we may fall into the trap of treating our presentation like an artwork. We may have difficulty cutting things or leaving things out. But since we will be doing this presentation to other people, it may be very useful to ask other people's opinions, because maybe they will say, maybe a majority of them will say, well, I didn't get the second part. Then you have a feedback that, you may have some issues with the second part. You may need to work on them. So I think I didn't do it before, and I regret that I didn't, but now I do. I recommend that you ask for the opinion of other people before you go into the presentation. And it's always a good idea, like I mentioned before, to keep a shortened version of your presentation with you. For example, let's say you're going to speak for 20 minutes, you have, 45 slides. It's a good practice to keep a shortened version of it, instead of, you know, having to deal with that on the spot right over there, what am I going to skip? What am I going to show? Instead of that, you can have a shortened version of your presentation, let's say half the time, 1/4 of the time. So if there's a last minute change and you need to switch gears, you can do that very comfortably without having to worry about that. And speaking of timing, I also recommend that you use two methods for rehearsing a presentation. One of them is using a chronometer to see actually how long the presentation lasts without any interruptions or without any changes. Let's say you have a 20-minute slot, and during rehearsal, you see that your presentation took 26 minutes. Okay, so now you have some idea that you will need to make some cuts to the presentation. And when you do those things, I recommend that you now use another technique, which is the timer, which is a countdown timer. The reason for that, for example, you have 20 minutes, you set it to 20. The reason for that is when the timer hits 0, you can look at what point in the presentation you are. And if let's say you're out of time, you can see how much more you have to go and maybe make minor changes or adjustments to the way your presentation flows so that you remain within the time frame. If it is a little less than 20, don't worry about it. No one has hated anyone before for keeping short, but I start really rolling when you pass your time, and they understand if they realize that this is going to take a while. So that was the rehearsal. And I want to share a couple of things about the body language, whether we are speaking in front of people, in front of the table, or sitting on a table, or even in a setting like this in front of the computer. I think the body language is extremely important because people will have a perception about you, a first impression about you, even before you start speaking. So for that reason, the way you walk up to the stage, the way you own the stage, the way you start, you know, showing yourself even before you utter the first word will create an impression on the audience. So it's going to be important that it's a good impression, especially if you're going to ask them to think differently, to change their mindset, to approve a budget, maybe one of the most difficult presentations. So it's important that you use your body language well enough to create that first impression on a high note. Besides your body, of course, you can also use facial expressions to convey many meanings. For example, you can smile, you can show a face of, you know, astonishment. You might even show a facial expression of, you know, a little anger. If you're passionate about the topic, if you truly believe that something needs to be done about this today, not tomorrow, you may even have to employ some facial expressions of, you know, passion, anger, or seriousness. So you can use your face in many ways in congruency with the message that you're telling your audience. So there are many possibilities for showing emotions. One of the things that I would tell you to not ever do would be turn your back on the audience. Never, ever turn your back on the audience. But for that, to maintain the eye contact with them, especially if you're using a stage and if there are slides behind you, you better know what's going on behind you on the stage, on that screen. And for that, I recommend that you use presenter notes to present the screen. It's a very strong tool that you can use to see what's going on behind you, even without turning your back. Because the moment you turn your back, you lose the eye contact. And when you go back, you need to establish that again, and they may have lost you. And depending on the place that you're using, that you're doing the presentation, you may need to adjust the size of your gestures, of your body language. For example, of course, if you're sitting in a table, you wouldn't be doing lots of grand gestures. But if you're using a stage, if you're speaking to, you know, hundreds of people, and if you want to speak about something that is important, you will open your you open your hands widely, and it will be in proportion with the size of the room that you're in. If you're sitting across the table, of course, there will be smaller gestures. In a large room, it will be bigger gestures. You can also adjust the gestures, for example, your hand gestures in parallel to the message that you want to give. If you want to talk about something big, you can use big gestures. But if you want to minimize the problem, for example, you can do this. Let's say you're in crisis management and you want to disregard the problem as small. I don't know if it's a good idea, but you may need to do that. And so besides rehearsal and body language, I also have the third part, which is the speaking style. Now, the speaking style is quite important because especially in the business presentations, especially in the conference rooms, in hotel rooms, in many environments, we see a lot of speakers using a single monotone voice, which is, you know, I'm going to keep speaking like this. And sometimes they speak softly. I'm going to speak in this soft monotone voice so you can feel free to sleep, but which is not what I want as a presenter. This was one of my biggest challenges. I may still need to cover a huge distance, you know, using a very variable vocal tone, but I'm convinced that is super important. So although it may feel a little uncomfortable to do that in the beginning, I recommend that you use that. But at the same time, you can use speaking tone, your speaking style or vocal tone or vocal variety to convey many sensations. You can be determined, you can be cautious, critical, depending on the situation or depending on the emotion, the sensation that you want to create. You can use your voice faster, slower, high, low, or, you know, in a way that conveys these sort of sensations on the other side. But as much important, if not more important than the way you use your voice, how you use your voice, is whether you use it or not at all. I think to this day, including when people deliver the presentation or where they made a speech or in any other place, I think there is huge, massive power in silence. And if you incorporate that into your speech at critical moments where you want your audience to focus on you, it can do huge wonders in your favor. One of the ways that we miss this opportunity, and I am guilty for this for many years, is adding sounds like, you know, I mean, I used to do this a lot. I still do it, but I'd like to think that is at least a little less. But in order to get comfortable with that, it needs practice. It needs a practice that probably will make you feel very uncomfortable. And it is about adding silence to the end of every single word. It sounds weird, I know. It sounds like you're talking like a robot or a machine. Yes, I know, I understand. But in order to be able to use that automatically or comfortably, we need to practice. We need to practice, and we need to get comfortable with the idea of maintaining silence where necessary. Some of the strongest speeches in history have prolonged silences. So I strongly recommend that you identify the points in your speech where you may use the power of silence and actually use it. And with that, that was the speaking style, the third thing that I wanted to share about the delivery. But like I said, I had one more thing. And the one more thing actually will come from the movie Matrix. If you remember, there was a scene where he was led to follow the white rabbit. My favorite movie of all times. I mean, some of you know me, I'm a total geek about this movie. My favorite scene is about the following the white rabbit, and therefore I say follow the green light. Especially these days, if you're making a presentation in front of the computer, there is only one way that you can maintain eye contact with your audience, and that is looking directly at the camera. Now, I think all the Mac laptops have this green light. I'm not sure if all the computers have it, but if your computer does not have it, I recommend that you take one Post-it and one hole puncher. Punch a hole on the sticky side of the Post-it put it onto the camera, and draw maybe some arrows onto the post-it, making you force yourself to look into the camera, because we have thousands of miles between us. And if I want to communicate effectively, I need to maintain a strong connection with you. Eye contact is one of the strongest ways to do that. But we may be easily inclined to look at the face of the people on the screen. But rather than that, I would like to look at the camera and maintain the eye contact. So that was the last thing. But okay, to be honest with you, I had one more thing. And okay, really, this is the last thing, but it is super important. So I would like to share that with you. Now, remember when I told you not to turn your face, not to turn your back on the audience and to use the presenter screen? It is one of the strongest tools that you can use to maintain eye contact with your audience. It is super easy, but I don't know why it is one of the least utilized. It is one of the most underutilized tools in the presentation world. And what it does is it gives you a screen like this. This is super useful because in this screen in front of you, you are able to see what is on the current slide, even without looking at the slide behind you. You are able to see what's coming up. Okay, I'm talking about this slide and this slide is coming up, so I may use a connection like this to transition smoothly. It also gives you presenter notes that you can write for yourself as reminders, as key points that no one else sees, only you see them. And at the bottom, it gives you a timeline of the presentation, where you are and where you're headed. It also shows you what the current time is and how long you've been speaking. And in order to use this, it's very easy to convert even your existing presentations in a very easy fashion. For example, let's say you have a slide like this that you're going to talk about marketing stuff, and then you have a chart, and then you have some speaking points. Now, remember, minimizing text. Actually, this is one of the best ways you can do that. You simply take those text on the slide and carry it down to where it says click to add notes, which you may have ignored until now. I know I did for years. I didn't know what it was. Well, this is what it is. You take those texts and put it there. So now you have more space on your slide to increase the size of the chart, to minimize the text, to increase the way that you can communicate with your audience. And of course, those notes are now visible to you in the presenter screen. If you want to refer to them, you can, they're right in front of you. But of course, for this, you will need to position the computer in front of you in a way that you're going to be able to see it and others won't. And one of the benefits of using presenter notes, besides giving you full control during the presentation, is if you want to rehearse with the notes, you can get a very quick print of the presentation with the notes themselves. So the software automatically puts a slide on the top, the presenter notes at the bottom, and you're able to print those things or create a PDF and work on them without crowding your slides. Okay, I promised that was the last thing, and I will keep my promise. So with that, I come to the ending of the delivery part as well. So those are the things that I wanted to share with you today, the pillars of content, design, and delivery. There is a huge, there are mountains of more information that exists on these topics. I just wanted to share with you a brief sort of tip of the iceberg. And like in any topic, there are very good subject matters on this topic. So there are many books that I recommend for reading, but these are my favorite, especially from Nancy Duarte, which is, I think, one of the biggest, she's my biggest fan in the presentation. No, I am her biggest fan in the presentation world. She's not my biggest fan. I am her biggest fan in the presentation world. Reynolds as well, and other books that I recommend. Speaking of books, warning, potential self-promotion.
Alper, sorry, we need to have some question taking also. I guess we have to get it up somehow.
Which is the next point. You got questions or you got answers.
So that was really great. I enjoyed it from the beginning on, and I learned a lot. Thank you, Alper. That was a good presentation, as it was like a Turkish one last time. So thank you. Any question? I believe you answered many already, but Andreas?
I've written 3 from the audience and from myself. I wanted to also thank you very much. That was amazing, and I don't want to take your time, but there are, first of all, Alper wrote a book. That was the last slide. So ask him for this book. That is brand new. It's fresh out of the prints, and get it. And get in touch with Alper. I wrote you the email address of Alper. You can have one-on-ones with him. He helped a lot of people so far to tweak their presentations so they stand in front of boards and companies and reporting, making compelling presentations. So boring people became very inspirational. I have 2 questions myself and one of the audience. The audience question is, how do we use builds? My 2 questions, as you mentor so many people already in the last couple of years, what is the biggest mistake people make, what you observed? What is the biggest mistake? And the second question of mine is, how do you interact on a virtual environment like that?
What is the biggest mistake, in my opinion? I think the biggest mistake is a mistake I have been guilty of for years, which is I thought that the presentation was about me. Look, I'm going to speak to you about this topic. Here is a topic. Okay. This was the biggest mistake I did for years. I didn't take into account the needs of the audience. I didn't take into account the existing beliefs or viewpoints of the audience. And I didn't take into account the fact that the presentation is not about me. I'm just a messenger. The presentation or the speech is always about the audience, because at the end of the day, they are the decision makers on to accept the message and go with it or completely reject it. And if they choose to reject it, it's too late. So the biggest mistake in my case was to put myself first before the audience's needs, to make the decision that, okay, this is what I'm going to talk about, this is my research, and now here I give you the message. No, I need to work on the audience, because when they listen to the message, of course, they will want to have the feeling that, well, this person seems to understand my world. This person seems to know about me, not personally, but about the things I care, about the things that I want. And if, as a presenter, I'm able to align my message with those needs, or where they want to go, or where they want to see themselves, then I have, I think, a much more open and fluid channel of communication, rather than saying, like I did before, okay, this is the message, I'm giving you the message. So I think the biggest mistake is not switching roles. The audience is the star of the presentation, not me. And the second question was about using the builds. Well, actually, it's super easy. In 30 seconds, I can show you how to do that. For example, can you confirm that you're seeing my software right now?
Screen, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So normally, what this is, there are 3 things here. Or let's take a more complicated slide, maybe. Okay. Let's say on this slide, I want to talk about the facial expressions, but I don't want this to come as a slide comes. A build is basically this. You select the things that you want to come in sequence, and you can click in the same sequence that you want them to come. So I select this box, and then I select this box, and under animations, these green things, actually all these green things, are the way that they're going to come onto the slide. Just because there are so many of them doesn't mean that I have to use all of them. My favorite is either fade or appear. So let's go with fade this time. And after that, now you will see that there are numbers here. This says number 1, this says number 1, which means they will come at the same time, but I don't want that. So still, right after fade, I come here and say, I want them to start on click. So now what's going to happen is, when you go to the presentation mode, you start with a black screen, because when you click, the facial expression comes. Are you able to see this, by the way?
Yes.
Just to confirm. Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So the software is waiting for me for the next click. And when I am ready to move, I hit next and the facial expressions comes. So the builds are actually simple animations that I add using this. Now, if you notice, there are also the yellow ones and the red ones. I rarely use them because one is about what to do when you hit them. For example, make this bigger or smaller, or even jump in its place. I don't know why the software has such a feature, but they thought it was necessary. And the other one is to disappear. But like I said, instead of using them, mostly I use the builds. And for example, in the text that I mentioned all the way up here, for example, on this slide, this is the slide. As you can see, it is only one slide with the 3 items in place. But you'll also notice that I have the numbers 1, 2, 3. And then this one here, which means everything will come separately. So sure enough, when you go into the slide mode, nothing comes until you hit once, and then until you hit twice, and then until you hit for the 3rd time. So that's just one of the quickest ways of incorporating builds into your presentation. Like I said, if you have a presentation for this evening, you can do this in 30 minutes or 1 hour. It's super simple, but super effective at the same time.
The third one was virtual interaction, and Matt Krause has another question. Maybe he would want to ask it himself.
Well, like most people, I'm also new to the virtual environment, so I'm still in my baby steps. But one of the things that I have noticed from attending virtual meetings is that I am much more connected to the speaker if on the screen, when I look at him or her, I am able to see his or her eyes. So for that reason, I think one of the best ways of maintaining that level of communication or interaction will be by looking at the camera. Now, I understand that this means you're not going to be seeing the faces of the people you're speaking to. But I think, in my opinion, as speaking from my own experience of being able to connect with the people who are speaking to me, in my opinion, it's a trade. It's a trade which is worth doing. So, yes, I don't see your faces. I see your heads moving on my screen, but I place more importance on looking at the camera rather than looking down there and losing eye contact with you. But like I said, I'm just in my baby steps. I'm sure there are much more ways of doing that. I'm sure it's just a matter of seeing how good other people do it and incorporating them. So this is one of the ones that I know.
Great. Matt, do you want to ask your question yourself?
Just for short reminding, then we can continue whoever wants to stay, because the session was actually aiming for 1 hour. And this is a great presentation. We can answer some more questions, but I would like to remind that we have actually training for this in Turkish. In the next class, we can arrange English also for demand. Just keep in mind in case you need one-to-one interaction training. So we can continue a bit longer, then I guess we should close the session. Matt?
So Matt.
I just had one question. Alper, you mentioned that the audience asks 3 questions, and that was good information. I want to write it down. What were those questions?
Those are some really good questions. When I was reading the book, I said, oh, I need to include these. Okay, I'm going to show you again. It's the book, you've got 8 Seconds by Paul Hellman. And this is the book. And the 3 questions, the first question is, why should I listen to this? It's very basic, but I mean, like I said before, I used to skip this part so many times in my life. I didn't even ask why they should listen to it. And some of the time they didn't. The second question is, what exactly are you saying? You know, clearly in a way that can be understood by every single person. I think that would be one of my criteria actually. If I were speaking to 20 people, at the end of it, if I ask 20 of them separately, I would hope to receive the same answer as to what I was saying. If they are saying 5 different things, then I didn't do my homework well. And the third one is, what should I do with this information? So what do you want me to do? For example, let's say my presentation is, the Earth is flat. Okay, great. What am I supposed to do with this information? So I need to include that into my presentation as well.
Wonderful. Alper, a question. Do you have a kind of summary which you would be able to send in the PDF to people who are interested?
I have a squeezed version, which with some of the same slides, but also with some of the different slides that I have as summary that I send after the presentation.
That would be great. So I put your email address, alper.rozanes@isg.com, here into this site chat. And you can either ask it directly from Alper and ask him also for one-on-ones or seminars, whatever you like, or you go through ISG and ask us, and we will help you to come to Alper. I don't want to take any further advantage of your time, all of you, the participants and the speakers. Thank you very much for this.
My pleasure as always.
Deep, very deep. And I can see you just slightly touched the points. There's a lot of more you can give on each point, I had the feeling. And I guess that can be a one-day workshop also. And when you have one, please let me know. I will definitely come.
I'll do that. Okay, I'll do that.
Into that. Buy the book, see the video again. I guess watching the video, we will make it available to you. That will help you again to remember. And thank you very much for your time. Have a wonderful week and see you next week with a new subject, which was, Nuray, Esra, what was next week's? We'll let you know.
We'll let you know, yeah.
See you.
Thank you everyone for coming.
Bye-bye. Have fun.
Bye-bye.
You have a last statement, Alper?
No. I just want to thank you everyone for coming, for taking the time. And it has been a real pleasure. And I really appreciate that. Thank you.
And when you go away, say bye-bye, open your mics and say,
like this.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Oh, David, how are you?
I'm here again. I was here all the time.
Bye-bye. Have a nice day.
Thanks for sharing. Thanks for your all efforts.
Thank you.
So many good friends.
Yeah, long time no see.
Müge, how are you?
I'm fine, and you?
You're great. I guess I haven't seen you for ages.
Yeah, you're right. It's been a long time. And you, how are you?
Good,
Everything's
good.
okay.
I watch you somehow. You are having a training company or something, no?
Yeah, in UK. I moved to UK.
Really?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah, it's a big changing for me. I think it's since I'm here from December, and as you know, in these days we have a big issue with coronavirus. So I'm still here, and all my job is cutting because of the coronavirus.
Sure.
My business model is very different from the right now, but I changed all business model and adapt in these circumstances.
Andreas, I'm sorry, YouTube channel is still on. Can you close this?
Okay.
Sorry, Miguel, how are you?
I'm fine, and you?